Good morning, Internet. Yes, Uncle Lou here. That's right, it's me. The Texas man and the Oklahoma man's favorite YouTuber, Uncle Lou. Thanks for tuning in. So Texas and Oklahoma want to join the SEC. At least that's what we're hearing. Of course, we hear this every couple of years, and it never happens. But it does appear to have more steam this time than normal. I will say that. The ball does seem to be further down the road towards this actually happening than at any time in the past. And of course, this goes back 10 or 12 years to when the Big 12 or the SEC expanded, initially adding Texas A&M and Mizzou. And you started to hear some rumblings about Texas and Oklahoma back then. And every couple of years since then, it seems like this is something that has popped up. What if Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12? Oh my God, if they went to the SEC, SEC would be a super conference. The Big 12 would crumble and disappear and go away. And all those things are true. If Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12, I don't see a scenario where the Big 12 survives. I just don't. Those aren't just two random teams within the Big 12. I mean, what if you took... I mean, this is like taking Ohio State and Michigan out of the Big Ten, or Southern Cal and Oregon out of the Pac-12, or Alabama and then you can argue after that which team you would put as second. But it's like you take the two top teams out of any league. That's a serious blow. And the problem for the Big 12 is that they're not in very good shape to start with. The Big 12. I mean, the Big 12. The commissioner of the Big 12, or the people that have been running the Big 12 for the last 10 or 12 years, are the dumbest people involved in any conference. Now, I know the Big 10 and the whole thing with the pandemic last year and canceling the season and then not canceling it, that was probably the worst single screw up that has happened within a conference. But the Big 12 takes the cake for the biggest number of screw-ups. I mean, they have been made... Every decision the Big 12 has had to make over the last 10 or 12 years has been the wrong one. From letting Missouri and Texas A&M or whatever walk out the door, to then choosing not to expand, which was just ridiculous. They went from all the other conferences, or, well, not all of them, but several of the other conferences were expanding. The Big 12 was shrinking. And they went on this whole thing about, well, yeah, we only have 10 teams. Regular season. Every team in the Big 12 plays every other team. That's the best way to do it. We only want 10 teams. We don't need more. We only want 10. We do it right and everyone else does it wrong. And then, of course, the NCAA said, well, that's fine, but you can't have a conference title game because you have to have a minimum of 12 teams to hold a conference title game. Big 12 goes, doesn't matter. Everyone else is doing that wrong, too. You don't need conference championship games. Decide your conference champion in the regular season by letting everybody play everybody. And then what happened? You had teams finishing with the same record. I mean, it was just a mess. It was just a mess. And how many national titles has the Big 12 won during that time? 0. So clearly they were the ones doing it wrong, not everyone else. They tried to blame everyone else to make themselves feel better, but they were the ones doing it wrong. Bad decision after bad decision. Well, they finally came to their senses once they realized that no one was watching the Big 12 anymore and the teams were getting worse, not better. While other conferences were improving, the Big 12 was sliding further down the Duke chute, honestly, into oblivion. So then they said, oh, NCAA, we were just kidding about not wanting to have a conference title game. We do want to have a conference title game, but we can't trick anybody into joining our league. No one wants to join this shit show. So can we please have an exception to the 12-team rule and hold a conference title game, even though we only have 10 teams? And the NCAA said, yeah. And so they let them hold their little piddly conference title game. Whee! Great. And Oklahoma's won it every single year since they started it. So great. Still, no national titles. Now, again, you're looking around these other conferences that have expanded up to 14 teams. You have shrunk down to 10. All of those other conferences that expanded are better than you. More people watch those other conferences than watch the Big 12. Meanwhile, during this 10-year period, one of the two teams that is supposed to keep your head above water in the Big 12 has barely been treading water themselves, the Texas Shorthorn. Their best season in the last 11 seasons was 2018, when they miraculously beat a Georgia team in a New Year's Six Bowl. That's their crowning achievement of the last 11 years, beating Georgia in a New Year's Six Bowl. Is that really where Texas wants to be? Sticking their chest out and bragging? That's what they're hanging their hat on? That silly-ass 10-gallon hat that they're wearing? They're hanging that silly-ass 10-gallon hat on a New Year's Six win over half a Georgia team. That's their crowning achievement during the period of time in which the Big 12 was trying to tell everybody else they were doing it wrong and the Big 12 was doing it right. What should have been one of the two teams keeping the Big 12 relevant was sliding further and further into oblivion. Did they try to expand during that time? No. BYU tried to get in, which don't get me started on that. And I don't blame the Big 12 for voting unanimously to keep BYU out. That was just a no-brainer. That was a no-brainer. But why is Boise State not in the Big 12 yesterday, last month, last year, 5 years ago? Why not? Why is Central Florida not in the Big 12? Why is Cincinnati not in the Big 12? Why is Memphis not in the Big 12? There's your 14 teams right there. There's your 14 teams. Oh, Central Florida's not in the Big 12 footprint. Hey, McFly, expand your footprint, deadbeat. You mean to tell me the Big 12's not interested in the Florida TV market? You mean to tell me the Big 12's not interested in the Ohio TV market with Cincinnati? A series of brain-dead decisions. And this whole thing about, well, Central Florida's too far away, this is ridiculous. I don't understand why people still have this idea in their mind that every Friday college football teams are loading up in a couple of horses and buggies and trekking cross country like it's the Oregon Trail. Or in Oklahoma's case, the Trail of Tears. Yes, Oklahoma is a reservation for white people, though. Indians own 90% of the land in Oklahoma. See the Supreme Court case if you don't believe me. Oklahoma is so backwards, the white people are running the casinos. And the Indians are gambling. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. Type about that if you want to, but that's not the point of this video. What is the point? I don't even remember anymore. Like most of my videos, there's not really a point. It's just 10 minutes of incoherent babbling. We're not getting in horses and buggies here and trekking for 3 days cross country to go to an away game. I mean, those days are over. These teams are taking chartered planes. What does it matter? Why do you care? Okay. So you're in Oklahoma State. Okay, you have to get on a plane once every other year and fly to play Central Florida. Who cares? Who cares? You're already flying to West Virginia every other year to play the Couch Burners. Look at Miami, one of the southernmost point of the United States, just about. They have to fly to Syracuse every who and again. Syracuse has to fly to Miami every once in a while. I mean, Arizona and Arizona State have to fly all the way up to Washington and Oregon. I mean, who cares? This thing that, well, Central Florida just doesn't fit in with the geography of the Big 12. What does it matter? What does it matter? This isn't the 1960s where you're taking buses to games. And so, well, we can only schedule teams that are within a 2-hour drive. That's ridiculous. Oh, what about the fans? What about them? Most fans have cable TV. They can still watch the game. The Big 12 just made a series of epic and disastrous decisions, and it's caught up with them. Why? They put the big noon kickoff. The big noon kickoff on Fox Sports. First of all, Fox and Fox Sports is everybody's like 8th choice when it comes to looking for a football game on Saturday. Just be real. When you sit down on your Barca lounger filled with mustard stains and cigarette burns on Saturday to look for a football game, Fox and Fox Sports is like the 11th channel you go to. I mean, and to make matters worse, you're taking the biggest game of the week and putting it on at noon, which is 11 a.m. local time for most Big 12 schools. All of them, I think, except for West Virginia. So, like this year, Oklahoma and Nebraska, noon, East Coast time, 11 a.m. local time. Why? Noon games get the least amount of views. 3:30 afternoon games are next, and primetime games is the most. There's a reason the playoffs and the national title game don't come on at noon. Isn't there? Yeah. So it's just been one bad decision after another in the Big 12. So do I blame Texas and Oklahoma for wanting to get out? No, I don't blame them at all. The Big 12 is a sinking ship and has been a sinking ship for the better part of the last 10 years. And the Big 12 has done nothing to address the problem. Nothing. They haven't even tried. They haven't even made an attempt. So I don't blame Texas and Oklahoma for wanting to get out. I don't blame them at all. It's been said for a while that college football is headed at some point to 4 quote unquote super conferences. And the number you hear most often is 16 teams, right? That would be a total of 64 teams, right? If you had 4 conferences, 16 teams each, that would be 64 teams. That would be your, what we now refer to as Power 5 teams, whatever they would call it, the Super 4 or whatever they would call it, right? If Texas and Oklahoma jump to the SEC, there's your 16 for the SEC. You look at the ACC and the Big 10, they'd each have to add a couple of teams to get to 16. Pac-12 would have to add some. The Big 12 would just disappear and crumble. I mean, the Big 12, if Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12, the chances of the Big 12 surviving more than 5 years after that is the same chances a fart would have of surviving a windstorm. Not much. So what are the other conferences going to do? Well, there are no big prizes left. If Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12, there's no big prizes left after that within the other. Well, Notre Dame would be the exception. So you'd have the ACC and the Big 10 fighting over Notre Dame, which, by the way, if we go to this 4-team super conference deal, Notre Dame should be, you can't force them to join a conference, but it should be made clear to Notre Dame that if you do not join a conference now, while we're moving to this 12-team playoff and a 4-conference alignment deal, if you don't join a conference now, you're not participating in the postseason anymore. You're not a part of the playoffs if you still want to hold your nose up at everybody else. And then we can laugh at Notre Dame just like we're laughing at the Big 12 now. Notre Dame will have made a terrible decision and will have to suffer the consequences. But Notre Dame should be told it's time to poop or get off the pot. Join a conference. If this happens with the 4 super conferences, Notre Dame needs to be in one. The Big 10 and the ACC can fight over them. Right now they're in the ACC in most sports other than football. So maybe the ACC makes sense. They have a lot of tradition against Big 10 teams for a long time. Before they had to deal with the ACC, they played a bunch of Big 10 teams. So maybe the Big 10 wants them. I don't know. So that would get the ACC to, let's say the ACC gets them. Well, it doesn't matter. If the ACC or Big 10, that would put one of those 2 conferences in would be at 15 teams. Who's left? Well, Cincinnati probably not getting into the Big 10 because they're in the state of Ohio. Ohio State's not going to want Cincinnati in the Big 10. So let's say Cincinnati jumps to the ACC. So if Notre Dame and Cincinnati join the ACC, there you go. And let's look, Cincinnati's better than half the teams in the ACC right now. And you say, well, they're just good now. Cincinnati's been good for a lot of years, over the last 10 years, under multiple coaches. So Cincinnati, to me, makes a lot of sense for to become a Power 5 team or a Super 4 or whatever they're going to call it down the road. The ACC should go out and get them. So if you give Notre Dame and Cincinnati to the ACC, they're good to go. The Big Ten would have to find a couple more teams. Boise State, Memphis, Central Florida, whatever. And then the Pac-12 would have to add some teams too. And let's not forget about the teams left over in the Big 12. And there will be some conferences that will come in and scoop up the scraps after Texas and Oklahoma are gone. Somebody will take Kansas. This came up last night on the call-in show. Somebody will take Kansas. This is a football channel. We talk about football 99% of the time. But football isn't the only factor when it comes to adding a team to your conference. Yes, it's a huge part of the decision-making process, but Kansas, a traditional basketball power, someone would take them. Somebody would take Kansas. They just would. Somebody would take them. What about the other teams left over in the Big 12? Kansas State, 50-50 chance of landing somewhere. I do think another one of the Texas teams would land somewhere, so either Baylor, TCU, or Texas Tech. Flip a coin. I mean, I don't know. Flip a coin on that. Maybe two get taken. I don't know. But listen, if Texas and Oklahoma, if Oklahoma's tired of winning 11 and 12 games in the regular season, join the SEC. Problem solved. Come on over, Oklahoma. Come on over. Tired of winning 11 and 12 games against terrible teams every single year? Fine. Come to the SEC and go 8-4. That'll be fine. No one will care. Come on over. We'll welcome you with open arms. I know you're tired of winning 11 and 12 games a year. You're begging to win 8. So come on, join the SEC. Texas? Texas has more losses to Kansas in the last 5 or 6 years than they do Big 12 titles. That's all you need to know. They lost 2 years in a row to Maryland. So Texas, come on. You want to struggle to make a bowl game? Join the SEC. Join the SEC. I know Texas A&M doesn't want them in. The literal rule in the SEC, it takes 4 teams to keep somebody out. So Texas A&M can pitch a fit and bitch and moan and stomp their feet and roll around on the ground and cry all they want. The technical rule in the SEC when it comes to expansion is that once a team is put forth to come into the league, 4 schools have to vote no in order to keep them out. That's the actual rule and bylaw in the SEC. Now, depending on who you believe or what you read, there's some unwritten rules where, Texas A&M already now is claiming they were promised when they joined the SEC that another Texas team would not be added. You can throw that promise out the window. You can take a shit in one hand and put that promise in the other. Let me know which one fills up first. This is a lot of money on the line, and I don't know how much a handshake from 12 years ago is going to mean when it comes time to actually make this deal or not. So we'll see. We'll see. Now, how are they going to divide the SEC up if Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC? I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of different options. I mean, you can keep the division system we have now with the East and the West. And instead of having 7 teams in each division, you'd have 8, right? You just have to figure out which 8 are going to go in each division. You've got some games in the SEC that have been played every single year for a long time, and people don't want to see those games go away. Alabama versus Tennessee is one, right? Alabama's in the West, Tennessee's in the East, but they play every single year, right? So people say, well, just move Auburn to the East and put Texas and Oklahoma in the West. Well, if you do that under the current SEC scheduling guidelines, Alabama could not play Auburn and Tennessee every year. They can only play one of them every year. No one wants to see that. So my honest and true feelings about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, I'm all for it. The more big games in the SEC, I'm all for it. Let them in. But I do want to make sure that some of these traditional rivalries that are played every year within the SEC remain. Tradition, at least to me, is a huge part of college football. And I don't want to, we're losing a lot of it already with some of the changes that have gone on in the last 10 or 15 years in college football. I would hate to see the games themselves start to go away. I know Alabama's dominating Tennessee right now, but there's been times when Tennessee dominated Alabama for a decade or so. So, college football is cyclical. So nobody wants the Alabama-Tennessee game to go away. Nobody wants the Auburn-Alabama game to go away. We want to try to keep these things. So you could keep East versus West, 8 in the East, 8 in the West. There's a thing, I guess ESPN or SEC Network or somebody put out the other day where you're basically splitting the SEC into 4 divisions. They didn't call them divisions. They called them pods. So you'd have 4 pods of 4 teams each. You play all of the other 3 teams within your pod every year. And then you play 2 teams from each of the other 3 pods every year. And those 2 teams rotate. So you have no permanent crossover games if you go to that model. And in the model that they drew the model up and they put the teams into pods in such a way that the traditional games that we're used to seeing every year we'll still get to see. So like one of the pods had Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, and I think Vandy. So you'd still get Alabama, Tennessee every year. You'd still get Alabama, Auburn every year. And then you'd get Alabama, Vandy every year if they put them in there, right? I think they had Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and Kentucky maybe or something like that was in one. Anyway, you get the idea. So I have no real problem with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. Is it going to happen? I don't know. Like I said, this rumor pops up every couple of years. So maybe you say, well, here we go again. Nothing's going to come of this again. I don't know. There seems to be a lot more smoke this go around, I guess, than there has been in the past. And college football is changing rapidly. Rapidly. We're getting ready to go to 12-team playoffs. Name, image, likeness. Maybe, going away from the quote-unquote Power 5 and moving to a Super 4 conference league or whatever is the way to go. We'll see. I don't know. I know I love college football, though. And this would give us some great games. I'd love to play Oklahoma twice every 6 years or whatever it works out to be. I'd love to play Texas twice every 6 or 8 years, however it works out to be. It'd be great. It'd be great. It's going to be funny, too, to hear Oklahoma and the Oklahoma fans and Texas fans. It's going to be hilarious hearing them chant SEC, ain't it? I did this last night on the call-in show. Let's do it again today, though. I know there's a lot of Texas and Oklahoma fans watching this video right now. Say it with me. It couldn't be easier. Start practicing now. Say it with me. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. SEC. 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 All right, Shorthorn and Land Thief Man. Good luck and have a good morning.